I leaned against the kitchen counter, taking a deep breath as the rich scent of cinnamon, nutmeg, and pumpkin filled the air. The golden brown crust of the pies shimmered slightly under the kitchen light as I set them on the cooling rack, feeling an odd sense of satisfaction. For perfect pies, each one a labor of love. Thanksgiving was a big deal to me. Not just because I loved to cook, but because it was one of the rare moments in life when everything was supposed to slow down. When families gathered around the table, sharing warmth, stories, and laughter. And this year was special. It was the first Thanksgiving where I was in charge. I had spent weeks planning the menu, running over every detail in my mind. The turkey was already brining, soaking in a delicate blend of herbs, citrus, and salt. Mashed potatoes were ready to be whipped into creamy perfection. My stuffing, my grandmother's famous recipe, was prepped and waiting. Everything had to be perfect. This wasn't just a meal. It was a statement. A statement that I could do this. That I belonged here. You see, when I married Rachel 2 years ago, I stepped into a role that came with unspoken expectations. Rachel had been married before, and she and her ex-husband, Marcus, had built a life together. A son, traditions, history. And I knew, deep down, that I was always going to be walking in the shadow of that past. I never minded it. I loved Rachel and I loved Nathan, her teenage son, who had, over time, started to feel like my own. I had done my best to prove that I wasn't just some stepfather trying to force his way in. I was here to stay, to be a steady presence in their lives. That's why this Thanksgiving mattered. It was my turn to host, my turn to show Rachel's side of the family that this home, our home, was just as much a part of the tradition as anything else. The sound of footsteps in the living room made me glance up. Nathan was rearranging the place cards on the dining table, a small smirk tugging at his lips as he swapped seats around. I grinned. Messing with my carefully planned seating arrangement, are we? He looked up, shrugged. Mom always lets me. Mom. The word still hit differently. Not because I was jealous, but because it reminded me that Rachel had a whole life before me. A life that, sometimes, felt like it was still lingering in the background, just beyond my reach. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked over, ruffling Nathan's hair as I peered at the table. You think Aunt Liz is really going to want to sit next to Uncle Henry after last year's political argument? Nathan snorted. Maybe that's exactly why I put them next to each other. I laughed, shaking my head, before stepping back and admiring our work. The table looked perfect. A warm centerpiece of autumn leaves, candles flickering gently, silverware polished to a shine. It was the kind of table you'd see in one of those picture-perfect Thanksgiving ads. And for a moment, I allowed myself to believe that everything really was perfect. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket, Rachel's name lighting up the screen. "Hey, honey," I said, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I adjusted the napkins. "You on your way?" There was a pause. One of those long, careful pauses that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "About that," she said finally, her voice careful. "Something's come up at work." I stilled. "Work?" I repeated, my fingers tightening slightly around the fabric of the napkin. I know, she sighed. "But it's an emergency meeting. I can't miss it." My heart sank. Rachel worked in marketing, and yes, sometimes urgent client calls came up, but on Thanksgiving? That didn't sit right. I forced a smile into my voice. "Can't it wait? I mean, everyone's coming. I've got everything ready. This is kind of a big deal." "I know, sweetheart," she said, and I could hear the fake regret coating her words. "But it's important. I'll be late, but I'll try to make it for dessert, okay?" My jaw tightened. I didn't want to sound controlling, and I wasn't the kind of husband to throw a fit over things like this. But something about the way she said it, like she had already made her decision, made my stomach twist. I swallowed down the frustration rising in my throat. "Fine," I said slowly. "Just don't be too late." "I won't," she promised. "Love you." I hesitated, then finally muttered, "Love you too," before ending the call. Nathan was watching me from the table, his expression unreadable. "Everything okay?" he asked. I forced a smile, even though my insides felt like they were curling into knots. "Yeah," I said. "Just work stuff." He didn't look convinced, and the way his eyes darted away, almost like he knew something I didn't, sent an uneasy feeling creeping down my spine. I turned back to the table, staring at the perfectly set dinner plates, the carefully arranged centerpiece, the flickering candlelight. Something wasn't right, and for the first time that night, I started to wonder if maybe this Thanksgiving wasn't going to be the picture-perfect moment I had been hoping for. The moment Rachel hung up, something in the air shifted. The warmth, the anticipation, the excitement. All of it seemed to cool, like a draft sneaking through a crack in a window I hadn't noticed before. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the Thanksgiving table I had spent weeks planning, the perfectly arranged silverware, the centerpiece I had driven across town to find, the name cards I had printed and carefully folded. It all felt pointless now. I wasn't an insecure man. I never had been. But there was something about Rachel's call, her tone, the casual way she dismissed the entire evening, that rubbed me the wrong way. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But Thanksgiving was a time for family, a time to be home. And yet, she had chosen work over this? Nathan had gone quiet. He was still sitting at the table, but now he wasn't playing with the name cards. He was just watching me. "You okay?" I asked, slipping my phone into my pocket. He hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Yeah," he said quickly. "It's whatever." The way he said it, the way he tried so hard to act like it didn't matter, made something inside me tighten. Nathan wasn't the type to get sentimental about things like holiday traditions, but I knew when he was holding something back. Before I could push further, the doorbell rang. I exhaled and forced myself to shake off the unease. James. Thank God. I opened the door to find my best friend standing there, a bottle of wine in one hand, a six-pack of beer in the other. "Thought you might need reinforcements," he said, stepping inside. "Figured you'd be drowning in in-laws by now." I managed to chuckle, even though my chest still felt tight. "Not quite," I said, leading him toward the kitchen. "Rachel just called. Said she's working late." James set the drinks down and frowned. "On Thanksgiving?" I nodded. "Apparently." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't say anything right away. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate look around the kitchen. The pies, the turkey brining in the fridge, the side dishes prepped and ready to go. "All this effort," he muttered, shaking his head, "and she just bailed?" I didn't like the way he said it, like he already knew something I didn't. "She said it was an emergency meeting," I replied, trying to sound neutral. James made a non-committal noise, then reached for a wine glass. "Look, man," he said, pouring himself a generous amount. I wasn't going to say anything, but since we're here. He paused, like he was debating whether to continue. I narrowed my eyes. "Since we're here, what?" He exhaled, swirling the wine in his glass before looking up at me. "I ran into Rachel yesterday." I blinked. "What?" "At the boutique," he said. "She was buying a watch. Not just any watch, though. A fancy one. The kind you get someone as a big, sentimental gift." Something cold ran down my spine. "So?" I asked, even though my gut was already telling me there was more to the story. "So," James continued, leaning against the counter, "I said something like, 'Ooh, nice. Lucky husband.' And she just got weird about it." "Weird how?" She laughed, but not in a normal way, more like she was caught off guard. Then she said it was a surprise for someone. A surprise for someone? My mind immediately went to Christmas. Maybe she was planning ahead? Maybe she wanted to throw me off so I wouldn't suspect she was getting it for me. But if that were the case, why did my stomach feel like it had just dropped? I forced out a chuckle, trying to play it cool. "You're reading too much into it," I said. "Maybe it was for me." James hesitated. Then he pulled out his phone. "I didn't want to be that guy," he said, scrolling through his camera roll, "but something about the way she acted rubbed me the wrong way. So I took a picture of the receipt when she left it on the counter." He turned the phone around and showed me the screen. My throat went dry. The receipt was time-stamped for yesterday afternoon. The watch had been engraved. "To M. Forever yours." I swallowed hard. M. My name didn't start with M, but Marcus's did. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. She could have bought it for someone else, I said, my voice hollow even to my own ears. James didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. I glanced toward the living room, where Nathan was still sitting at the table, looking down at his phone, pretending not to notice our conversation. He knew. I was sure of it now. James, I said, my voice tight, tell me I'm being paranoid. My best friend just sighed, taking another sip of wine. I'd love to, he muttered, but I don't think I'd believe it. I turned away, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles went white. Rachel, my wife, the woman I had built a life with, was she really lying to me? And if she was, how long had she been doing it? I took a slow, steady breath and grabbed my own wine glass. This wasn't just about a watch. This was about Thanksgiving. And if my suspicions were right, this wasn't the first Thanksgiving she had skipped. It was just the first time I was paying attention. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter, staring at the picture on James's phone like it might morph into something different if I just looked hard enough. To M. Forever yours. The engraving on the back of the expensive watch Rachel had bought. M. Not A for Andrew. M for Marcus. I felt like an idiot. James watched me, his usual laid-back demeanor gone. He was waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to react. I wanted to. I wanted to yell, slam something, demand answers. But there was no one here to give them to me. Rachel was gone. She'd made sure of that. Instead, I took a slow, deep breath, reaching for my phone. Nathan was still in the other room, quiet as ever, his head down as he mindlessly scrolled through his phone. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but my hands were moving before I could stop them, opening our banking app. If Rachel had gone so far as to buy a watch for Marcus, what else had she been doing? The screen loaded. November 15th, Cartier, $3,200. November 3rd, Hotel Maplewood, $489. October 28th, Le Jardin, $180. A tight feeling settled in my chest. Le Jardin. That was the restaurant where she had taken me on my birthday. It was our place. And now, staring at the charge on the screen, I realized I hadn't been the one sitting across from her that night. I kept scrolling, my stomach twisting as the pattern became clear. Dinners, hotels, expensive gifts. And then I saw it. A mortgage payment. $2,500. Wired directly to Marcus's name. I nearly dropped the phone. She wasn't just sneaking off for fancy meals and expensive gifts. She was paying his mortgage. James let out a slow whistle over my shoulder. Damn. I barely heard him. My vision tunneled as I stared at the evidence in front of me. Rachel wasn't just having an affair. She was maintaining another household. And I'd been too blind to see it. My phone buzzed in my hand, and for a second, I thought maybe it was Rachel. Maybe she was about to confess, tell me the truth before I could confront her. But it wasn't her. It was a text. From an unknown number. You might want to check where she's really having dinner tonight. My pulse spiked. James, I said slowly, turning the screen toward him. He read it, his eyebrows lifting slightly. Jesus. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Someone knew. Someone had been watching this unfold, waiting for the right moment to tell me. I felt sick. Nathan, I called, my voice sharper than I intended. He hesitated before getting up and walking over, his movements careful, almost like he knew what was coming. I turned the phone toward him. This message, I said, do you know anything about it? His eyes darted to the screen, and that single moment, that tiny flicker of recognition, told me everything I needed to know. Nathan knew. He had known all along. Talk to me, kid, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. What's going on? He swallowed, shifting on his feet. Dad, he muttered. I stiffened. What about him? Nathan exhaled, looking down at his hands. Mom spends Thanksgiving with him. I blinked, my mind struggling to process the words. What? She always has, he admitted, his voice quiet, ashamed. Even after you married her. She just never told you. I couldn't breathe. James let out a low curse under his breath, but I barely registered it. I looked at Nathan, my stepson, the boy I had spent the past 2 years raising, supporting, loving, and I realized that he had been forced to lie to me this whole time. How long have you known? I asked, my throat dry. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. A while. A while? My voice cracked. And you never thought to tell me? He looked guilty. Mom made us promise. Me and Leo. Leo, Marcus's son. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. I had spent the past 2 years thinking I was part of this family. But Rachel had made sure I was never truly included. I pulled a chair out and sank into it, rubbing a hand over my face. James stayed quiet, letting me process. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But more than anything, I wanted answers. She spends every Thanksgiving with him? I asked, my voice hoarse. Nathan nodded. Yeah. Even last year? He hesitated before nodding again. The weight of the betrayal settled over me, heavy and suffocating. Last year, Rachel had told me she had a work trip. She had kissed me goodbye, thanked me for understanding, promised she'd make it up to me when she got back. And I had believed her. But now, sitting in this kitchen, staring at my stepson who had been forced to cover for her, I realized the truth. Rachel hadn't been in another city. She had been with Marcus, with her real family. My hands curled into fists. I had been lied to, manipulated, played for a fool. And suddenly, that anonymous text made perfect sense. Whoever sent it had been waiting, watching. And they knew that tonight, just like every other Thanksgiving, my wife was playing house with her ex-husband. I took a deep, steadying breath and looked at James. Where's Marcus's house? James smirked. I was hoping you'd ask. I turned to Nathan, my voice firm. Does your mom know that I know? He shook his head. No. Good. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and pulled up my lawyer's number. Where are you going? Nathan asked, his voice uncertain. I looked him dead in the eye. To give your mother the Thanksgiving surprise she actually deserves. I wasn't thinking about the pies cooling on the counter, or the perfectly set table I had spent all day preparing. I wasn't thinking about the way Rachel had kissed me goodbye that morning, promising she would be home in time for dessert. I was thinking about revenge. Cold, calculated, public. Rachel had lied to me for years. She had spent every Thanksgiving pretending to be the perfect wife while secretly playing house with her ex-husband, Marcus. She had manipulated our marriage, drained our bank account, and worst of all, made her own son lie to my face. And now, she was about to get exactly what she deserved. I stood in the kitchen, my phone pressed to my ear as my lawyer, Elliot, picked up. Andrew? His voice was sharp, businesslike. Happy Thanksgiving. What's up? I need divorce papers. Tonight. There was a pause. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Elliot sighed. All right. I can have them drafted within a few hours. You want them served tomorrow? No, I said, my grip tightening around my phone. I'm serving them tonight. A slow whistle came through the line. Oof. That bad? Worse. I filled him in, my voice tight, controlled. When I finished, Elliot didn't hesitate. I'll have them ready by 9 p.m., he said. You just let me know where to deliver them. I hung up, my mind already working through the logistics. James leaned against the counter, arms crossed. So, what's the plan? I exhaled, steadying myself. I'm going to crash her perfect little Thanksgiving dinner and give her something to be truly thankful for, her freedom. James grinned. You're insane. No, I corrected, grabbing my coat. I'm just done being played. Assembling the team. Before heading out, I sent a quick text to Nathan. Tell me everything about dinner tonight. Where, when, who's there? 3 dots appeared instantly. Nathan, Mom's at Marcus's house. Dinner is at 4. His parents are there, plus Leo. She told them you were working late. My blood boiled. Another lie. Me, stay put. I'll handle it. Nathan didn't reply, but I could only imagine what was running through his head. Next, I sent a message to my lawyer. Meet me at 8 p.m. Bring everything. Then, I called my sister, Denise. She picked up after one ring. Happy Thanksgiving. You better have made extra stuffing. I need your help. She must have heard something in my voice because her tone immediately shifted. What's going on? I gave her the short version. Silence. Then, that lying witch. Yeah. What do you need? I smirked. You free for a little Thanksgiving spectacle? Denise laughed. Oh, you have no idea how much I've been waiting for this moment. I texted Elliot again. Change of plans. Make copies of the papers. Bring extras. If I was going to ruin Rachel's dinner, I was going to do it right. Thanksgiving betrayal. Up close and personal. By 3:45 p.m., I was parked 2 houses down from Marcus's place. It was exactly what I expected. Big, expensive, and decorated to perfection. The driveway was full. Candles flickered in the windows. A warm, cozy Thanksgiving scene straight out of a magazine. My wife was inside that house, laughing, toasting, playing the loyal, loving mother and partner she had never actually been. Not for me. I clenched my jaw and waited. James was across the street, parked in his car with binoculars. He insisted on coming along, for moral support. Elliot arrived next, pulling up beside me. He stepped out, a thick folder in his hands. Here you go, he said, handing it over. Signed, sealed, ready for delivery. I took the papers, flipping through them. Good. At exactly 4 p.m., I got out of my car, walked up the driveway, and rang the doorbell. The Thanksgiving bombshell. The door opened, and there she was. Rachel. Her smile froze the second she saw me. Andrew, she said, voice tight. What are you doing here? I stepped inside, looking past her. The table was set. Marcus was pouring wine. His parents sat nearby, chatting. Nathan and Leo were on the couch, watching me like they already knew what was about to happen. I turned back to Rachel, my expression neutral. I came to join the family dinner. A pin-drop silence settled over the room. Rachel's hands twitched. Andrew, let's talk outside. No, I said, stepping further inside. We'll talk here. I walked to the dinner table, set the divorce papers down between the turkey and mashed potatoes, then looked up at Marcus. You should read these. I have a feeling they concern you too. Rachel's face went pale. Marcus picked up the papers, eyes scanning. His expression darkened. You're divorcing her, he asked. I smirked. Yes. And she's been using my money to pay for your house. Gasps. Rachel lunged for the papers, but Denise appeared in the doorway, stopping her. Oh, don't even try it, Denise said, folding her arms. You got caught. Sit down and take it. Rachel's parents stared, speechless. Marcus's parents looked horrified. Nathan's face was unreadable, but Leo? He was grinning. Mom. Nathan finally spoke, voice quiet. Is it true? Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. Silence stretched. I pulled out my phone, hit play on a recording. Rachel's voice filled the room. Her call from earlier. Her lie. Marcus's fist clenched. You told me he was working today, he muttered, realization dawning. Rachel's entire body slumped. I turned back to her, voice steady. You made your choice. Now, you can live with it. I reached for my coat, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. Marcus's mother was yelling. Marcus was demanding answers. Nathan looked relieved. Rachel? She just stood there, silent, the weight of her own betrayal crushing her. As I stepped outside, James leaned against his car, smirking. Well, he asked. I exhaled. That went better than I expected. Elliot chuckled. I assume we won't be seeing her at next year's Thanksgiving? I grinned. Not unless she wants a restraining order with her pumpkin pie. The air outside was crisp, but my blood was boiling. I stood on the porch of Marcus's house, listening to the muffled chaos behind the door. Rachel had been caught. Exposed. No more hiding, no more lying. I had just dropped a bomb in the middle of her perfect Thanksgiving dinner, and now, she had to deal with the fallout. James leaned against his car across the street, arms crossed, a smug look on his face. My lawyer, Elliot, stood next to me, flipping through some legal papers like he had just witnessed the most entertaining court case of his career. Well, James called out, do we get an update, or do I have to check the evening news for this one? I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. They're still in there, trying to figure out how to save face. Elliot smirked. Spoiler alert, they can't. I turned back toward the house. Through the window, I could see Rachel, her arms crossed, her mouth moving fast, trying to defend herself, trying to make excuses. Marcus was yelling. His parents looked horrified. Nathan sat stiffly on the couch, his expression unreadable. Good. Let her squirm. I wasn't leaving yet. Not until she fully understood just how badly she had destroyed the life she so carefully pretended to maintain. Taking a deep breath, I stepped back inside. The final nail in the coffin. The moment I walked in, all eyes turned to me. Rachel's face was pale. Her lips parted like she was about to say something. But for once, she had no words. Marcus clenched his jaw, still gripping the divorce papers in his hand. "You told me he was working late," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "You said he wouldn't be home until after dinner." Rachel swallowed hard. "Marcus, please." "No." He slammed the papers down on the table, turkey grease smearing across the legal text. "Tell me the truth. How long have you been lying?" Silence. Rachel's mother finally spoke. "Rachel!" Her voice was laced with disappointment, the kind that cut deeper than anger. "Please tell me this isn't what it looks like." Rachel's eyes darted between everyone in the room, her mind working overtime, searching for a way out. But there was none, because I had made sure of it. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen toward Marcus. "Recognize that transaction?" I asked, my voice steady. He squinted at the screen. His name. A direct deposit. His eyes widened. "Wait, this is my mortgage." "Yep," I said coolly. "Guess who's been paying it?" Marcus slowly turned his head toward Rachel. His hands curled into fists. "You told me you were struggling financially," he seethed. "You said you could barely make ends meet." Rachel flinched. I kept going. "She's been using our joint account," I said. "My money. My income. My hard-earned salary, to pay for your damn house." Rachel's father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Rachel," he said sharply, "is this true?" Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing. Nathan suddenly stood up. "That's why we had to lie to him, isn't it?" His voice was quiet, but there was anger there. "You made us keep your secret because you didn't want him to know." Rachel's eyes snapped to him. "Nathan, sweetheart, it's not like that." "It is exactly like that." The room went silent. Nathan looked at me, his face conflicted. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to ruin everything. I thought, I don't know, I thought maybe it didn't matter." He exhaled shakily. "But I was wrong. You deserve to know." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you for saying that." Rachel's gaze darted toward me, desperation creeping into her expression. "Andrew, please. We can fix this. We can talk about it, work through it." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Rachel," I said, shaking my head, "there is no fixing this." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it on the table. She gasped like I had physically struck her. "Consider this my final gift to you," I said. "Congratulations. You're finally free to have the life you apparently wanted all along." Her breath hitched. "You don't mean that." I gestured to the divorce papers, still smeared with turkey grease. "Oh, I do." The breaking point. Marcus suddenly let out a bitter chuckle. "Well," he said, shaking his head, "this has been one hell of a show." Rachel turned to him quickly. "Marcus, please. You know I care about you." "Save it," he snapped. "You lied to me too." He looked disgusted. "Hell, at least Andrew had the decency to expose the truth. I've been living in the lie." Rachel's face twisted in frustration. "I was trying to do what's best for everyone." "Everyone?" Marcus scoffed. "Or just yourself?" Rachel snapped. "You don't get to judge me," she shouted, her voice breaking. "None of you do. You act like I had some evil plan, like I was trying to hurt anyone, but I was just trying to hold everything together." "For who?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because it sure as hell wasn't for me." Silence. Marcus ran a hand down his face, shaking his head. "I can't believe this," he muttered. I took a step back, exhaling deeply. "You don't have to believe it," I said. "You just have to live with it." Rachel's shoulders slumped. For the first time, She truly looked defeated. I turned toward Nathan. You have a choice, I told him softly. You can stay here, or you can come home with me. Nathan didn't hesitate. I'm coming with you. Rachel let out a choked breath. Nathan. He didn't look at her. The walkout. I turned, walking toward the door. Nathan followed. James smirked from the doorway, giving Rachel a mocking little wave. Happy Thanksgiving. Elliot, ever the professional, simply nodded at me. I'll handle the paperwork. Rachel didn't move, didn't speak. As I walked out, I heard Marcus mutter, guest dinner's ruined. I grinned. Mission accomplished. I stepped outside, the cold air refreshing, freeing. James clapped me on the back. Damn, that was beautiful. I glanced at Nathan. You okay? He nodded. Yeah. A pause. Then, thank you for choosing me. I ruffled his hair. Always, kid. Rachel had made her choice. And now? So had I. As I drove away, I rolled down my window, letting the crisp night air fill my lungs. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about family, and for the first time, I finally knew who mine really was. The drive home was quiet. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out the window. I didn't push him to talk. He had just watched his mother's carefully crafted world implode in front of everyone she had spent years deceiving. And me? I was still riding the high of delivering her the biggest serving of karma imaginable. But the moment the car pulled into the driveway, that high faded. Because this wasn't over. Not really. Nathan unbuckled his seatbelt and looked over at me. Are you okay? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Shouldn't I be the one asking him that? I let out a slow breath, gripping the steering wheel. Yeah, I said, though the truth was a little more complicated. I think I will be. Nathan nodded, but didn't move to get out of the car. Instead, he hesitated. What is it? I asked. He swallowed hard, staring at the dashboard. I don't know what happens next. For the first time, he sounded uncertain. Not the typical teenager who brushed everything off, who acted like nothing fazed him. Right now, he wasn't trying to play it cool. He wasn't hiding behind sarcasm or indifference. He was just a kid who had been caught between two lives for far too long. I sighed, running a hand down my face. I don't either, I admitted. But we figure it out together. One step at a time. Nathan nodded. I don't want to go back. I looked at him, really looked at him. Then you don't have to. It was that simple. Rachel had chosen her web of lies. Nathan was choosing the truth. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's get inside. We walked into the house, and the warmth from the oven still lingered in the air. The Thanksgiving dinner I had poured my heart into sat untouched on the counter. The pies, the mashed potatoes, the turkey that had been brining for 2 days. All of it wasted on a night that hadn't gone at all the way I had planned. I exhaled, staring at the meal, shaking my head. What a damn shame, James muttered, stepping in behind us. He had followed in his car, probably wanting to make sure neither of us fell apart. He walked over to the counter, grabbing a fork and digging into the stuffing like he hadn't just witnessed an entire marriage collapse in real time. Nathan cracked a small smile. You're really just gonna eat like nothing happened? James shrugged. Dude, I didn't get to have dinner. I sat in my car watching a live-action soap opera unfold. I earned this. He took another bite, then pointed his fork at me. You should eat too. Both of you. I wasn't hungry. But Nathan? He hesitated for a second, then walked over, grabbed a plate, and piled on food like he hadn't eaten in days. I watched him for a second before finally grabbing a plate of my own. Because James was right. This dinner had originally been about family. And just because one person had chosen to betray us didn't mean we had to let her ruin the whole damn night. We sat at the table, the three of us. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I had planned, but maybe it was the one I actually needed. The fallout begins. The peace didn't last long, because an hour later, my phone started blowing up. Rachel. Her name filled my screen over and over, her desperate attempts to reach me growing more frantic with each missed call. I let them go to voicemail. But then, the text started. Rachel. Andrew, please pick up. Rachel. We need to talk. Rachel. I can explain everything. Rachel, just tell me where Nathan is. We need to fix this. I rolled my eyes, tossing my phone onto the table. Let me guess, James said. She's in full damage control mode? Oh yeah, I muttered. She suddenly wants to talk now that she's lost everything. Nathan looked at the phone, his fork pausing midair. Are you gonna answer her? I met his gaze. No, not tonight. Nathan didn't argue, and I realized in that moment that he didn't want to talk to her either. A shift in power. Rachel wasn't used to losing. She had spent years orchestrating this perfect balancing act, keeping her double life intact, keeping me in the dark, keeping Nathan and Leo wrapped around her finger. But now, she had lost control, and I could feel it in every desperate text, every unanswered call. She was unraveling. James stretched, standing up from the table. All right, I think I've had my fill of family drama for the night. He clapped me on the back, then looked at Nathan. You gonna be okay, kid? Nathan nodded. Yeah. James pointed his fork at me. And you? You good? I smirked. I'm better than good. James grinned. That's what I like to hear. He grabbed another slice of pie for the road, then headed out the door, whistling like he had just had the best meal of his life. Nathan stood up, stretching. I'm gonna head to bed. I nodded. All right. If you need anything? I know, he said. Thanks. Then he hesitated, and in the quiet, he did something he had never done before. He walked over and hugged me. It wasn't long, or dramatic, or emotional, but it was real, and that meant more than anything. I patted his back, keeping my voice steady. Get some sleep, kid. He nodded, then disappeared down the hall. I sat there for a while, finishing my drink, letting the weight of the night settle. For years, I had been living in Rachel's version of the truth. But now, I was finally free. And the best part? This was only the beginning. Because Rachel still had one final lesson to learn. Actions have consequences. And I wasn't done serving mine yet. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. Rachel. I sighed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I glanced at the clock. 6:42 a.m. She had called 16 times. And the texts? Even worse. Rachel, Andrew, we need to talk. Rachel, you can't ignore me forever. Rachel, I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like. Rachel, please, just let me explain. I scoffed, tossing my phone onto the nightstand. Not what it looks like. It was exactly what it looked like. She had spent years lying to my face, using my money to fund her second life, making her own son lie to me, and now that she was finally exposed, she wanted to talk? No, she didn't get to talk her way out of this one. I sat up, stretched, and made my way to the kitchen. Nathan was already there, sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone. His plate had nothing but crumbs left on it, and the coffee mug next to him was half empty. Morning, I said, opening the fridge. Morning, he muttered back. I grabbed some leftover pie, because honestly, after last night, I deserved it, and leaned against the counter. Did your mom text you? I asked, watching his reaction. He nodded, still staring at his screen. Yeah. I waited, but he didn't say anything else. You gonna answer her? I asked. Nathan exhaled, setting his phone down. I don't know. She keeps saying we need to fix things. He looked up at me. What is there to fix? I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I set my plate down and sat across from him. Listen, Nathan, I'm not going to tell you what to do. She's your mom, and I get it. But just be careful, okay? She's not above trying to manipulate this situation. Nathan let out a bitter chuckle. Yeah, no kidding. I nodded. I just don't want you to feel like you have to choose between us. I know she's going to try and guilt you into that. He looked at me, serious now. I already chose. I wasn't expecting that. But the way he said it, so sure, so steady, it hit me harder than I thought it would. He had spent years watching his mom juggle two lives, making him keep secrets, pulling him between two homes like a pawn in her game. And now, he was done. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't Rachel. It was Elliot. I picked up immediately. Tell me you have good news. Elliot chuckled. Oh, I have great news. The divorce papers? Filed. The financial investigation? Underway. And guess what? I smirked. What? The board at Rachel's company just got wind of her financial misconduct. Using your money for Marcus's mortgage? Yeah, that's a huge problem. I nearly laughed. Are you telling me she's about to lose her job too? Not just that, Elliot said, sounding almost giddy. They're considering pressing charges. Fraud. My friend. My grin widened. Rachel had spent years building up this perfect, curated image of herself. The doting mother. The hard-working businesswoman. The woman who had everything under control. And now? It was all coming crashing down. Send me every document you have, I said. I want copies of everything. You got it, Elliot replied. Oh, and one more thing. Marcus? He reached out to my office last night. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yep. Looks like your little Thanksgiving stunt made him realize just how deep he was in Rachel's mess. He wants to sue her for deception. I let out a low whistle. Damn. Elliot chuckled. I'd say she's having the worst day of her life. Good. She deserved every second of it. The final blow. At exactly 10 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a courier standing there with an envelope. Delivery for Andrew, he said. I took the envelope, thanked him, and closed the door. Nathan watched me from the table. What's that? I grinned, flipping it over. The final nail in your mom's coffin. I opened it, skimming the contents. Court orders. Financial freezes. Legal notices. Rachel's world was about to be turned inside out, and I was going to be the one to deliver the news. I grabbed my keys. You coming? I asked Nathan. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, let's go. Rachel's breaking point. We arrived at Rachel's house 20 minutes later. Her car was in the driveway. Good. I walked up to the door, knocked twice, and waited. When she opened it, she looked hollowed out, dark circles under her eyes. Her hair a mess. Her usual polished look completely gone. Good. She deserved to feel even a fraction of what she had put me through. Andrew, she started, her voice shaky. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Save it, I said, pulling out the envelope. I just came to deliver these. I shoved the papers into her hands. She blinked, flipping through them. As she read, her face went from confusion to horror. What is this? I smiled. That's the end of your double life. She shook her head, stepping back. No, this can't. It can, and it is. She looked up at me, eyes desperate. Andrew, please. We can fix this. No, I said, stepping back. You can live with it. Nathan, who had stayed quiet this whole time, finally spoke. I'm staying with Andrew, he said firmly. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Rachel's eyes snapped to him. Nathan, you don't mean that. I do, he said, voice steady. You made me lie to him. For years. I'm done. Rachel visibly crumbled. She had lost everything. Her husband, her son, her career, her reputation, and she had no one to blame but herself. I turned, walking back toward the car. Nathan followed, not looking back. As I pulled out of the driveway, Rachel stood in the doorway, watching her world collapse. And I had never felt lighter in my life. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, the weight of everything was beginning to settle in. The divorce was in motion. Rachel's finances were being investigated. Her carefully crafted image was crumbling before her eyes. And yet, as I put the car in park, I didn't feel exhausted. I felt free. Nathan sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring straight ahead. He hadn't said a word since we left Rachel's house. I didn't push him. He needed time to process what had just happened. But I could tell, something had shifted. After years of being caught in his mother's web of lies, he had finally cut himself free. Hey, I said, nudging his arm. You okay? He blinked, exhaling sharply, as if breaking out of a daze. Yeah, he muttered. I don't know. It's weird. I nodded, understanding. Yeah, it is. He hesitated, then turned to look at me. Are you okay? I let out a small chuckle. That's the second time you've asked me that in 2 days. He smirked, but there was still hesitation in his eyes. It's just, I've never seen you like this. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? Nathan shrugged. Like you don't have to pretend everything's fine. I wasn't expecting that. For so long, I had convinced myself that if I just kept things steady, if I just played my role, then everything would work out. That Rachel would come around. That she would finally let go of the past. But she never did. And now, for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting for something that was never mine to begin with. I was done. And Nathan saw it too. I sighed, leaning back in my seat. Yeah, I admitted. I think I finally am. The fallout begins. Back inside, I grabbed a beer from the fridge, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the couch. Nathan went straight to his room. He probably needed a moment to himself. I didn't blame him. I took a slow sip, letting the silence settle over me. And then, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Elliot. I smirked, answering immediately. Tell me it's more good news. Oh, it's fantastic, he said, sounding far too excited for a lawyer. Rachel's company just fired her. I choked on my drink. Wait, what? You heard me, Elliot said, laughing. The second they got wind of the financial investigation, they cut her loose. Apparently, they don't take too kindly to employees who embezzle money, even if it's their own husbands. I whistled. Damn. Oh, and it gets better, he continued. Marcus officially filed his lawsuit. He's demanding she pay back every cent he unknowingly accepted from her. I grinned. Guess he's not so loyal after all. Not when his money's on the line, Elliot agreed. And that's not even the best part. I raised an eyebrow. There's more? Oh, buddy. Elliot laughed. Rachel called my office begging me to ask you to stop everything. I nearly fell off the couch. You're kidding. Nope. Full-on meltdown. She's desperate. I leaned back, shaking my head. She didn't care when she was lying to me for years. She didn't care when she was draining our account. And now that it's all crashing down, she suddenly wants mercy? Elliot chuckled. That's how it always goes. I exhaled. Let her sweat. She deserves it. You got it, Elliot said. I'll keep you updated. I hung up, tossing my phone onto the coffee table. Rachel's entire world was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The closure I didn't expect. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. For a second, I thought it might be Rachel. Maybe she had finally built up the nerve to face me in person. But when I opened it, I found Marcus standing there. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you here. He let out a bitter chuckle. Yeah, well, I didn't expect to find out my girlfriend was still married either. I crossed my arms. What do you want, Marcus? He hesitated, then sighed. Look, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I blinked. That wasn't what I was expecting. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely ashamed. I had no idea she was still tied to you like that. I really thought she had moved on. I scoffed. Yeah? Well, so did I. Marcus exhaled, nodding. I get it. And look, I know I'm the last person you want to hear this from, but you deserve better than what she did to you. I stared at him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Yeah, I do. Marcus let out a humorless laugh. Guess we both got played, huh? Guess so. He shook his head. Well, at least one of us got out early. I smirked. Better late than never. Marcus turned to leave but paused. Nathan's a good kid. You're lucky to have him. My chest tightened slightly. I know, I said. And with that, he left. The first real Thanksgiving. That night, I reheated the Thanksgiving dinner I had originally planned. James came over. Denise brought wine. And Nathan? He sat at the table, laughing for the first time in days. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I had planned, but in a way, it was so much better. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't sitting at the table, pretending. I wasn't waiting for Rachel to walk through the door, wondering if she really wanted to be here. I wasn't trying to force something that had never been real to begin with. I was free, and as I raised my glass, looking around at the people who actually chose to be here, I realized something. Rachel had spent her whole life trying to juggle two families, lying to everyone around her, pretending she could have it all. And in the end, she lost everything. But me? I had finally found the one thing that mattered. A real family. And this time, it wasn't built on lies.